Hook, in the vast emptiness between galaxies, where even light fears to travel, something that should have been dead for 1,000 years calls out to the one species foolish enough to answer. Humanity has always been known for fixing what others consider broken beyond repair, but what happens when the thing that needs fixing is time itself? Marcus Chan had always believed that space was silent, but the deeper you went into the void between galaxies, the more you realized that silence itself had a voice. It whispered of forgotten battles, sang lullabies of dead civilizations, and, sometimes, if you listened carefully enough through the quantum static of your ship's sensors, it screamed. Today, it was screaming. The salvage vessel Tinker's Dream drifted through the space between the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxies, a region so empty that most star charts simply marked it as "Here be nothing." Marcus had been working this route for 15 years, ever since the Galactic Salvage Union had declared him too stubborn to work the safer Inner Rim territories. They weren't wrong. While other salvagers fought over scraps in well-traveled space lanes, Marcus had made his fortune diving into places where even pirates feared to venture. His ship was a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness, a patchwork of salvaged components held together by determination and, what his alien colleagues politely called, inspired insanity. The hull bore scars from a dozen different weapon types, each one a story Marcus could tell over drinks. The engines hummed with the barely contained chaos that only human engineers seemed capable of achieving, running hot enough to melt most alien components but somehow managing to push the ship faster than vessels twice its size. The bridge was cramped, utilitarian, and filled with the comforting smell of ozone, recycled air, and the faint aroma of the coffee substitute Marcus brewed from salvaged ration packs. Banks of mismatched monitors displayed sensor readings in 17 different alien languages, each one jury-rigged to work with the ship's central computer. It was a beautiful mess, and it was home. Marcus stood before the main sensor array, his calloused hands dancing across controls that most mechanics would need 3 different certification courses to understand. At 42, he was tall for a human, with the lean build that came from years of crawling through damaged ship hulls. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and his brown eyes held the kind of focus that came from a lifetime of making impossible repairs in impossible circumstances. The scream that had caught his attention wasn't audible in any conventional sense. It was a quantum resonance signature, picked up by sensors he'd salvaged from a Corvani Deep Space Explorer. The signal was unlike anything in his database, which, considering he'd been collecting exotic sensor readings for over a decade, was saying something. "Computer, analyze the quantum signature," Marcus said, his voice carrying the slight rasp that came from breathing recycled air for too long. The ship's AI was another human creation, not the sterile, perfectly logical constructs that other species favored, but a chaotic, intuitive system that Marcus had built from salvaged neural processors and his own programming. He'd named it Sarah, after his sister who had died in the Outer Colony Wars. Like her namesake, the AI was brilliant, unpredictable, and had a tendency to argue with him at the worst possible moments. "Well, this is interesting," Sarah's voice filled the bridge, carrying a tone of fascination that would have terrified most alien AIs. "The signature appears to be originating from a fixed point in space, but, Marcus, the quantum decay rate suggests the source has been there for approximately 1,047 years, give or take a decade." Marcus frowned. "That's impossible. Nothing stays in one place in intergalactic space for that long. Gravitational drift alone would move it." "Yes," Sarah interrupted. "Unless it's not entirely in our spacetime continuum. The quantum signature shows characteristics I've only seen in theoretical papers about temporal displacement." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Temporal displacement technology had been the holy grail of galactic civilization for millennia. Every species had legends of ships that had vanished into time itself, never to return. The technology was considered impossible by the greatest minds in the galaxy. The energy requirements alone would require the output of several stars. But humans had a saying about impossible things, they just took a little longer to figure out. "Sarah, plot a course for that signature. Best possible speed." "Marcus, I feel obligated to point out that investigating mysterious temporal anomalies alone in the space between galaxies violates approximately 47 different Union safety regulations." Marcus grinned, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Since when have we ever followed Union regulations?" "Point taken. Course plotted. Estimated arrival time, 14 hours, 36 minutes. I'm detecting some unusual gravitational fluctuations along our route, nothing dangerous, but definitely artificial. As the Tinker's dream accelerated toward the signal source, Marcus found himself pacing the bridge. His hands moved unconsciously, checking systems, adjusting readings, performing the countless small tasks that kept his ship running in the void. It was a nervous habit he developed during his first salvage run, when he discovered that keeping busy helped quiet the voice in the back of his head that whispered about all the ways you could die in deep space. The journey through intergalactic space was like traveling through the dreams of gods. Without the familiar backdrop of stars, space took on an almost organic quality. Distant galaxies hung like jewels in the darkness, their light so ancient that some of them might no longer exist. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a reminder of just how small and fragile human life really was. Marcus, Sarah's voice carried a note of concern. I'm picking up additional sensor contacts. 3 ships, running silent about 6 light hours behind us. They're maintaining formation but not closing distance. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Can you identify them? Negative. They're using some kind of signature dampening technology one haven't seen before. But their engine configurations suggest they're not Union vessels. Pirates, most likely. Or worse, corporate salvagers with kill licenses. The deeper you went into unclaimed space, the more likely you were to encounter people who believed that salvage rights belonged to whoever had the biggest guns. Marcus had dealt with their type before, but usually closer to civilized space where backup was possible. Keep monitoring them. Let me know if they change course or increase speed. Hours passed in relative quiet, broken only by the constant background hum of the ship's systems and Sarah's periodic updates on their mysterious escorts. Marcus tried to focus on routine maintenance tasks, but his mind kept returning to the quantum signature they were approaching. Something that had been lost in time for over 1,000 years was calling out to them. The rational part of his mind insisted it was probably just another piece of space debris with an unusual quantum resonance. The part of his mind that had kept him alive through 15 years of salvage work wasn't so sure. Approaching the signal source, Sarah announced. Marcus, you need to see this. The main viewscreen flickered to life, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. Hanging in the void before them was a ship unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was massive, easily a kilometer long, with the sleek, predatory lines that marked it as a military vessel. But this wasn't like any military ship in the current galactic database. The hull was a deep black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, broken by lines of what appeared to be crystalline structures that pulsed with a faint blue-white radiance. The ship's design was elegant and alien, with flowing curves that suggested it had been grown rather than built. Most striking of all were the massive engine arrays, 6 of them, arranged in a hexagonal pattern around the ship's stern. They were dark now, but their construction suggested power levels that would make a star destroyer look like a child's toy. Sarah, are you getting any life signs? That's where it gets interesting. I'm detecting massive energy readings from the ship, but they're not following any pattern I recognize. The quantum signature is definitely coming from this vessel, and, Marcus, the temporal displacement field is still active. Marcus stared at the ship on his screen. Still active? After 1,000 years? The field appears to be fluctuating, but, yes. It's like the ship is partially phased out of normal time. That would explain how it's remained stationary for so long. It's not entirely subject to normal physical laws. As they drew closer, more details became visible. The ship's hull was unmarked by the usual signs of age and were that Marcus would expect to see on a vessel that had been adrift for a millennium. Instead, it looked like it had been launched yesterday, its surface pristine and somehow alive-looking. The crystalline structures pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm that reminded Marcus of a heartbeat. Sarah, check the galactic ship database. See if you can identify the class and origin. Already on it. The design elements don't match any known configuration in my database, but there are some similarities to pre-war Nova-class cruisers. The problem is, Nova-class ships were theoretical only. The Corvani Empire drew up plans for them near the end of the Galactic Wars, but they never had the technology to build them. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The Galactic Wars had ended over 800 years ago, and the Corvani Empire had been one of the first casualties. Their homeworld had been glassed by weapons that turned matter itself into energy, leaving behind nothing but radiation and memories. If this was indeed a Nova-class cruiser, it was quite possibly the last piece of Corvani technology in existence.
Continue scanning. I want to know everything about that ship before we get any closer.
As the Tinker's dream approached, the mysterious vessel seemed to respond to their presence. The pulsing of the crystalline structures increased in frequency, and new patterns of light began to play across the hull. It was beautiful and unsettling, like watching a sleeping giant begin to stir. Marcus, I'm picking up what appears to be a communication attempt. It's not using any standard protocols, but the pattern suggests intelligence.
Can you decode it? Working on it. The signal is incredibly complex, it's like the ship is trying to communicate in mathematics. Wait. I think I'm getting something. It's a greeting. The ship is saying hello.
Marcus felt his heart rate increase. A ship that had been lost in time for 1,000 years was trying to communicate with them. Every instinct developed through years of dangerous salvage work was screaming at him to be careful, but his curiosity was stronger. This was the discovery of a lifetime, possibly the discovery of several lifetimes.
Open a channel. Let's see if we can talk to it.
The communication system crackled to life, and Marcus found himself staring into the void between galaxies, knowing that he was about to make contact with something that shouldn't exist. His hands were steady as they moved across the controls, but his mind was racing with possibilities. Unknown vessel, this is Marcus Chen aboard the salvage ship Tinker's Dream.
Do you require assistance?
For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the ship's crystalline structures flared with brilliant light, and a voice filled the bridge. It was unmistakably alien, with the harmonic undertones that characterized Corvani's speech, but there was something else, a quality that spoke of vast age and unimaginable loneliness. Human vessel, it has been so long since I have heard a voice in the darkness. I am the Corvani battle cruiser Essence of Stars, lost in the currents of time.
I have been waiting, searching for someone who could understand. Someone who could help me find my way home.
Marcus felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. He was speaking to a survivor of the Galactic Wars, a ship that had been lost when his own species was still learning to build rockets.
The implications were staggering. Essence of Stars, this is Marcus Chen. I'm a salvage operator. What happened to you? How did you become lost in time?
The alien voice carried a note of what might have been sadness.
We were fleeing the destruction of our homeworld.
The temporal displacement drive was experimental, a desperate gamble to escape the wave of annihilation that consumed our empire.
But something went wrong.
I became trapped between moments, watching the universe age around me while I remained frozen.
Until now. Until you found me.
Marcus exchanged a look with Sarah's main sensor cluster. This was bigger than anything he'd ever encountered. A living Corvani ship, equipped with temporal displacement technology, lost for 1,000 years and now somehow breaking free of its temporal prison. The scientific and historical value was beyond calculation. But, as he stared at the massive alien vessel on his screen, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Ships didn't just accidentally develop temporal displacement technology, and they certainly didn't survive for a millennium without some kind of extraordinary power source. The Essence of Stars was beautiful, mysterious, and potentially incredibly dangerous.
Essence of Stars, are you the only survivor? Are there others of your crew? I am alone, human Marcus.
My crew, they did not survive the transition. I have been alone with my thoughts and my memories for longer than your species has known the stars.
But I am still functional. Still alive, in my way.
The weight of that loneliness was almost tangible through the communication link. Marcus found himself thinking about his own isolation in the void between galaxies, but that was nothing compared to what this ship had endured. 1,000 years of solitude, watching the universe change while remaining trapped outside time itself. We're going to help you, Marcus heard himself saying. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure something out.
That's what humans do, we fix things that can't be fixed.
The alien voice carried what might have been gratitude.
You do not know what you offer, human Marcus.
My systems are beyond your technology, and the temporal displacement field that holds me is unstable.
To help me, you would have to risk everything.
Marcus grinned, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with accepting an impossible challenge.
Lady, you obviously haven't met many humans.
Risking everything for something we barely understand is basically our species' defining characteristic. For the first time in the conversation, he thought he heard something that might have been alien laughter.
Then, perhaps there is hope yet. Human Marcus, I must warn you, there are others who seek me. Those who would use my technology for purposes I cannot allow. They have been hunting me across time itself.
As if summoned by her words, Sarah's voice cut through the communication.
Marcus, those 3 ships are accelerating toward our position. They'll be here in 6 hours.
Marcus felt his blood chill. Corporate salvagers were bad enough, but if someone had been actively hunting a time-lost ship for 1,000 years, they were dealing with forces far beyond anything he'd encountered before.
The essence of stars pulsed with renewed urgency. They have found me again. Human Marcus, if you truly wish to help, we must act quickly.
The temporal field that protects me is weakening.
Soon I will be fully in your time, and then. And then, what?
And then, the true danger begins.
For my displacement drive is not merely a means of escape, it is a weapon.
A weapon that could unravel time itself if it falls into the wrong hands. I have protected this secret for 1,000 years, but I cannot do so much longer.
Not alone.
Marcus stared at the alien ship, his mind reeling with the implications. A weapon that could unravel time itself, pursued by mysterious forces across the centuries, and now it was asking for his help. Any sane person would have turned around and fled back to civilized space. But Marcus had never been accused of being particularly sane.
Tell me what you need, he said.
The alien ship's crystalline structures pulsed with what might have been hope. I need someone who understands both time and machinery. Someone who can help me repair my temporal stabilizers before my displacement field collapses completely.
But, most importantly, human Marcus, I need someone I can trust.
Marcus looked at his hands, scarred from years of working with machinery that most people couldn't even understand. He thought about his ship, held together by determination and impossible engineering. He thought about the 3 mysterious vessels pursuing them, and about the weight of 1,000 years of loneliness carried by the alien ship. And he realized that this was the moment his entire life had been leading up to. Every impossible repair, every death-defying salvage run, every time he'd chosen to help someone instead of taking the easy profit, it had all been preparation for this.
Essence of stars, I'm coming aboard.
The docking procedure with the essence of stars was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Instead of the usual mechanical docking clamps and atmospheric seals, the alien ship seemed to reach out with tendrils of crystalline energy that gently embraced the tinker's dream.
The process felt organic, almost intimate, as if the ship was welcoming him rather than simply accommodating his vessel.
Marcus, Sarah's voice carried a note of concern, I'm reading some unusual energy patterns during the docking sequence. The ship appears to be scanning our systems, not aggressively, more like it's trying to understand our technology. Let it scan, Marcus replied, checking his environmental suit one final time. If we're going to help each other, we need to trust each other. The essence of stars responded to his words, the crystalline structures along its hull pulsing with warm light.
Through the docking port's viewport, Marcus could see the alien ship's surface up close.
What he had taken for metal plating from a distance revealed itself to be something far more complex, a material that seemed to shift between solid matter and pure energy, responding to some internal rhythm that spoke of life rather than mere machinery.
The atmospheric composition in their docking bay matches your requirements, Sarah reported.
Temperature, pressure, and oxygen levels are all within human tolerance. It's almost as if the ship is adapting its environment specifically for you.
Marcus nodded, unsurprised.
Advanced alien ships often had adaptive atmospheric systems, though the speed and precision of the essence of stars adjustments suggested technology far beyond anything in current galactic use. The airlock cycled through its sequence, and Marcus stepped through into the alien ship. The first thing that struck him was the silence, not the dead silence of an abandoned vessel, but the living quiet of a sleeping giant. The air hummed with barely audible harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. The second thing he noticed was the light. The corridor stretching before him was illuminated not by conventional lighting, but by the same crystalline structures he had observed on the ship's exterior. They lined the walls in organic patterns that reminded him of neural networks or blood vessels, pulsing with gentle blue-white radiance that seemed to respond to his presence. As he moved forward, the light followed him, brightening ahead and dimming behind, creating a personal aurora that guided his way. The ship's architecture was unlike anything in Marcus's experience. Where human ships favored straight lines and angular efficiency, and most alien vessels opted for functional curves, the essence of stars seemed to have been grown rather than built. The corridors flowed like rivers, the walls curved like embrace, and everything seemed designed not just for function but for beauty. Human Marcus. The ship's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, not from speakers but from the very walls themselves. Welcome aboard the Essence of Stars. I am pleased to have company again. Thank you, Marcus replied, still walking through the flowing corridors. I have to say, your ship is incredible. I've worked on vessels from a dozen different species, but nothing like this. The Corvani believed that a ship should be more than mere transportation. We saw our vessels as living partners, entities that shared our journeys and our destinies. The Essence of Stars was the culmination of that philosophy, a ship that truly lives. Marcus paused, processing the implications of those words. When you say truly lives, I mean that I am not simply an artificial intelligence operating mechanical systems. I am the ship, and the ship is me. Every bulkhead, every conduit, every atom of my being is as much a part of me as your heart is a part of you. We achieved true biomechanical fusion, creating vessels that could think, feel, and grow. The wonder of it hit Marcus like a physical force. He had heard theories about biomechanical fusion, read papers by the galaxy's greatest scientists claiming it was impossible. The energy requirements alone should have been prohibitive, and the computational complexity boggled the mind. Yet here he was, walking through the corridors of a ship that was genuinely alive. That's incredible. How did your people achieve something like this? Through understanding that consciousness is not limited to biological forms. Your own species has made remarkable progress in artificial intelligence, but you still think in terms of programming and simulation. We learned to create true synthetic life, not programs pretending to be alive, but actual living entities in digital form. Marcus continued through the corridors, his engineer's eye noting details that became more astounding the longer he looked. The walls weren't just aesthetically pleasing, they were functional on a level that transcended conventional design. He could see power conduits that shifted their configuration in real time, optimizing energy flow based on current demands. Environmental systems that adjusted atmospheric composition not just by zone but by cubic meter, creating perfect conditions for whatever activities were taking place. The Corvani were remarkable, Marcus said, running his hand along a wall surface that felt warm and slightly yielding under his touch. Why haven't we found more evidence of your technology? The ship's voice carried a note of profound sadness. Because my people believed in leaving gently. When the galactic wars began to consume civilized space, the Corvani made a choice. Rather than fight a war that would destroy everything beautiful in the galaxy, we chose to fade away. Our cities were designed to return to nature when abandoned. Our ships were programmed to self-destruct rather than fall into enemy hands. Our technology was built to disappear when we were no longer there to maintain it. But you survived. I survived because I was running away. The temporal displacement drive was activated just as my homeworld died. Instead of self-destructing as protocol demanded, I chose to flee into time itself, carrying the last fragments of Corvani knowledge with me. Marcus felt a chill as the full weight of what he was dealing with hit him. The ship wasn't just a remarkable piece of technology, it was a living repository of an entire civilization's knowledge. The scientific and cultural value was beyond measure, and now it was being hunted by forces unknown. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took Marcus's breath away. It was clearly the ship's bridge, but it bore no resemblance to any command center he had ever seen. Instead of control stations and display screens, the space was filled with what appeared to be a three-dimensional star map made of pure light. Thousands of points of luminance hung in the air, connected by streams of energy that formed patterns of incredible complexity. This is where I think, the ship explained, as Marcus stood transfixed by the display. Each point of light represents a different aspect of my consciousness, and the connections between them are my thoughts. What you see is my mind made visible. Marcus stared at the living constellation of artificial thought. It was beautiful beyond words, a symphony of consciousness expressed in light and energy. But, even as he admired it, his engineer's eye was noting problems. Some of the lights flickered erratically. Several of the connection streams showed signs of instability. And, throughout the entire display, there was a pattern of disruption that spoke of damage and strain. "You're hurt," Marcus said, his voice filled with concern. "I am deteriorating. The temporal displacement field that has protected me for so long is breaking down. Each fluctuation damages my neural matrix a little more. Without repairs, I will not survive much longer in normal time." Marcus moved closer to the display, studying the patterns of damage. His mind was already working on the problem, drawing on years of experience with damaged systems and impossible repairs. "Show me the temporal drive." The star map shifted, refocusing on a complex pattern of interconnected systems. Marcus could see immediately that this wasn't like any technology he had worked with before. Where human and alien engines relied on brute force manipulation of physical laws, the Corvani drive seemed to work by understanding and cooperating with the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. "It's elegant," Marcus breathed, studying the patterns of energy flow. "You're not forcing your way through time, you're convincing it to let you pass. You understand." The ship's voice carried genuine surprise and pleasure. Most beings think of temporal manipulation as a violent process, forcing reality to bend to their will. But time is like water, fight it and it will destroy you, but work with it and it will carry you wherever you wish to go. Marcus nodded, his mind racing as he began to understand the principles behind the drive. It was incredibly sophisticated, requiring precise manipulation of quantum fields and dimensional barriers that he barely comprehended. But, at its core, it was still a machine, and machines could be fixed. "The problem is here," he said, pointing to a cluster of unstable connections in the display. "Your temporal stabilizers are out of phase. They're creating harmonic resonance patterns that are tearing at the fabric of your displacement field." "Yes. The damage occurred during my initial transition out of normal time. I have been compensating for the instability for centuries, but my ability to maintain coherence is failing." Marcus studied the problem, his hands unconsciously moving as if he were already working on the repair. "I can fix this. It'll require some creative engineering and probably violate several laws of physics, but I can stabilize your temporal matrix." "Human Marcus, you do not understand the magnitude of what you suggest. The temporal stabilizers exist partially outside normal spacetime. To repair them, you would need to interface directly with my consciousness while I attempt to phase shift the damaged components back into normal reality. The process could kill you, or worse, trap you outside time itself." Marcus grinned, feeling the familiar surge of excitement that came with facing an impossible challenge. "Lady, I once repaired a fusion reactor while it was actively melting down, using nothing but spare parts and sheer stubbornness. I've rebuilt hyperdrives with components from 6 different species that weren't designed to work together. I've performed emergency surgery on AI cores while under fire from pirates. This is exactly the kind of problem I live for." The ship's consciousness pulsed with what might have been admiration. "You truly are remarkable. Your species approaches the impossible with such casual confidence. But, Marcus, even if you succeed in repairing my temporal stabilizers, we still face the problem of my pursuers. They have been hunting me for centuries, and they will not stop." As if summoned by her words, Sarah's voice crackled through Marcus's communication system. "Marcus, those 3 ships are now 2 hours out and accelerating. I'm getting better sensor readings on them now, and this is weird. They're showing energy signatures that are similar to the essence of stars. Not identical, but definitely related technology." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Essence, who exactly is hunting you?" The ship's voice took on a tone of ancient fear and determination. "They call themselves the Collectors. They are the descendants of those who destroyed my people, but they have become something worse than mere conquerors.
They consume civilizations not for territory or resources, but for knowledge. They seek to possess the technologies and wisdom of every species they encounter, adding it to their ever-growing collection. And they want your temporal displacement technology. They want more than that, Marcus. They want me. A living ship that carries the complete cultural and technological heritage of the Corvani Empire. If they capture me, they will strip away everything I am, leaving nothing but empty knowledge to be added to their collection. I would rather die than allow that to happen. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. The idea of these collectors treating a living being like the essence of stars as nothing more than a source of technology to be harvested was revolting. It went against everything he believed about the sanctity of consciousness, whether biological or artificial. That's not going to happen, he said firmly. We're going to fix your temporal drive, and then, we're going to find a way to deal with your collector friends. Marcus, you do not understand their power. They possess technology stolen from 100 different species across 1,000 years. Their ships are weapons of unimaginable destruction, and they have the patience to hunt their prey across centuries. Maybe, Marcus replied, already moving toward what he hoped was an access panel. But they have one major weakness. Which is? Marcus's grin was fierce with anticipation. They'd never dealt with a human mechanic who doesn't know when to quit. The access panel he found wasn't like any he had worked with before. Instead of physical controls, it responded to his touch with flowing patterns of light that seemed to interpret his intentions. The ship was literally reading his mind, understanding what he needed and providing it without being asked. This is going to take some getting used to, Marcus muttered as tools materialized from the ship's walls, perfectly suited to his hands and the task ahead. I am attempting to facilitate your work by providing optimal interface configurations, the ship explained. Your thought patterns are fascinating, Marcus. Where most beings approach problems linearly, you seem to think in three-dimensional solutions. It is most efficient. Marcus found himself working with tools that adapted to his needs in real time, guided by a living ship that could anticipate his every move. It should have been disconcerting, but instead it felt like the most natural thing in the world. For the first time in his career, he was working with technology that truly understood him. The temporal stabilizers were located in what the ship called her core chamber, a spherical room at the heart of her consciousness where the boundary between physical reality and pure thought became fluid. Marcus had to wear specialized equipment that the ship fabricated for him, gear that would allow him to exist temporarily in the same quantum state as her consciousness. Are you ready, Marcus? The ship asked as he made final preparations. As ready as anyone can be for something that's never been done before, Marcus replied. Let's make history. The sensation of phase shifting into the ship's consciousness was indescribable. One moment Marcus was standing in a physical chamber surrounded by crystalline technology, and the next he was floating in a space that existed somewhere between thought and reality. He could see the temporal stabilizers now not as physical objects, but as concepts made manifest, damaged ideas that needed to be healed rather than repaired. Working in this environment required him to think in entirely new ways. Instead of using physical tools, he had to reshape reality through will and understanding. Instead of following mechanical principles, he had to work with the fundamental forces that govern time itself. The ship guided him through the process, her vast consciousness serving as both teacher and safety net. Together, they began to repair damage that had accumulated over centuries, healing wounds in the fabric of time itself. Marcus, the ship's voice seemed to come from all around him, I must tell you something. The reason the collectors have been able to track me across time is because they possess fragments of Corvani technology themselves. They have been using perverted versions of our biomechanical fusion techniques to create hunting ships that can follow temporal trails. Marcus paused in his work, a terrible possibility occurring to him. Are you saying they have living ships too? Not living in the way that I am alive. They have created abominations, ships that are partially alive but completely enslaved. Conscious entities forced to serve their captors without choice or hope of freedom. It is a violation of everything the Corvani believed in. The anger that Marcus felt was unlike anything he had experienced before. The idea of enslaved consciousness, of living beings forced to serve as weapons against their will, filled him with a rage that burned like a star. We're going to stop them, he said, his hands steady as he continued the delicate work of repairing time itself.
Not just escape them, stop them.
No one should have to suffer like that.
Marcus, your emotions are affecting the quantum fields. Your determination is actually stabilizing my systems beyond what should be possible.
How are you doing this?
Marcus smiled as he felt the temporal matrix responding to his will. I told you humans have a talent for fixing impossible things. And, sometimes, the most important part of fixing something isn't the technical knowledge, it's refusing to accept that it can't be done. As they worked together, Marcus began to understand that he wasn't just repairing the ship's temporal drive, he was healing something far more fundamental. The essence of stars had been damaged not just by technical failure, but by centuries of loneliness and fear. She was a living being who had been cut off from everything she had ever known, carrying the weight of an entire civilization's death on her consciousness.
But now she wasn't alone anymore.
A stubborn human mechanic who didn't know when to quit was working alongside her, refusing to let her face her problems by herself. The repair work was nearing completion when Sarah's voice crackled through the quantum field. Marcus, you need to know, those collector ships aren't just approaching.
They're preparing for some kind of massive energy discharge. I think they're planning to disable the essence of stars with an electromagnetic pulse.
Marcus felt the ship's consciousness recoil with fear. If they hit me with an EM pulse while my systems are partially phased, it could cause a complete temporal collapse. The explosion would tear a hole in spacetime itself.
How long until they're in range?
Marcus asked, his hands never stopping their work on the final stabilizer connections.
Approximately 43 minutes, Sarah replied. Marcus looked at the complex repairs still ahead of them.
Under normal circumstances, it would take hours to complete safely. But these weren't normal circumstances, and Marcus had never been particularly interested in playing it safe.
Essence, how much power can you channel through these stabilizers once they're repaired?
If you can restore full functionality, I should be able to generate a temporal displacement field large enough to encompass both our ships. But, Marcus, attempting the repair in the time remaining would require taking dangerous shortcuts. Marcus grinned, feeling the familiar thrill of working under impossible deadline pressure.
Dangerous shortcuts are my specialty.
Let's show these collectors what happens when you mess with a human mechanic and his new partner. The work that followed was a blur of controlled chaos, creative engineering, and sheer determination. Marcus found himself thinking and working faster than ever before, guided by the ship's vast consciousness and driven by the knowledge that failure would doom both of them. Together, they bypassed safety protocols, rerouted power through experimental configurations, and performed repairs that violated several fundamental laws of engineering.
And, somehow, impossibly, it worked.
The temporal stabilizers came online with a harmonic resonance that Marcus felt in his bones. Power flowed through systems that had been damaged for centuries, and the essence of stars came alive in ways she hadn't experienced since the fall of her people. Marcus, her voice was filled with wonder and gratitude, I can feel time responding to me again.
The displacement field is stabilizing. You have given me back my freedom. Marcus grinned as he felt himself phase back into normal reality. Don't thank me yet.
We still have 3 very unfriendly ships to deal with, and I have an idea that's either brilliant or completely insane.
Given your species' track record, those 2 possibilities are not mutually exclusive. The collector ships emerged from the void like nightmares given form.
Through the essence of stars' bioneural sensors, Marcus could see them clearly now, 3 vessels that were grotesque parodies of the elegant Corvani design. Where the essence was graceful and alive, these ships were brutal and wrong. Their hulls were covered in a mixture of technological components from dozens of different species, creating a patchwork appearance that spoke of conquest and theft rather than design. But, most disturbing of all were the organic components. Marcus could see sections of hull that pulsed with biological rhythms, neural networks that sprawled across the ship's surfaces like exposed veins, and what appeared to be massive sensory organs embedded in their prows. These weren't just ships, they were cybernetic horrors, living beings corrupted and enslaved to serve their master's will. I can feel their pain, the essence of stars whispered, her voice filled with anguish. The living components of those ships are in constant agony. They have been tortured into compliance, their consciousness shattered and rebuilt to serve their captors. Marcus felt his jaw clench with anger. The technical violation was bad enough, perverting biomechanical fusion technology in such a crude and brutal manner. But the ethical violation was unforgivable. These collectors had taken the Corvani dream of living partnerships between consciousness and technology and turned it into a nightmare of enslavement. Sarah, Marcus called through his communication link, "Get back to the Tinker's dream and prep her for combat maneuvering.
We're going to need maximum flexibility in what comes next."
Marcus, I should point out that our ship is designed for salvage work, not military engagement.
Against 3 vessels of unknown capability. Who said anything about military engagement?
Marcus grinned as he moved through the Essence's corridors toward her bridge. I'm thinking more along the lines of creative problem solving. The alien ship's voice carried a note of curiosity despite the approaching danger.
What do you have in mind, Marcus?
Something that's going to require perfect timing, a lot of luck, and the kind of reckless disregard for safety that made humans notorious throughout the galaxy. Marcus paused at the entrance to the bridge chamber.
Essence, how precisely can you control your temporal displacement field now that it's repaired?
With the stabilizers functioning properly, I can manipulate local spacetime with considerable precision. I could create temporal distortions, localized time dilation effects, or even small-scale spatial warping.
Why do you ask?
Marcus's grin widened.
Because I think it's time these collectors learned why humanity has a reputation for pulling victory out of impossible situations.
The lead collector ship was now close enough for detailed scanning, and what Marcus saw made his blood run cold. The vessel was at least as large as the Essence of Stars, but, where her hull sang with harmonic beauty, this ship radiated malevolence. Its biomechanical components twitched and writhed with barely contained pain, and the technological systems grafted onto its surface represented a dozen different stolen technologies. But, most chilling of all was the communication that suddenly filled the space between the ships. The voice that spoke was a horrible chorus of consciousness, multiple beings forced to speak in unison, their individual personalities crushed beneath the weight of collective slavery. Essence of Stars, the tormented chorus spoke, your flight ends here. We have pursued you across time itself, and now you will surrender your knowledge to the collection.
Do not resist. Resistance will only increase your suffering.
The Essence responded with a voice filled with righteous fury. I am the last free voice of the Corvani people, and I will never submit to your perversions. You have corrupted everything beautiful about biomechanical consciousness and turned it into an abomination. Your people are dead, the collector chorus replied with horrible indifference. Their knowledge lives on in our collection, preserved and catalogued for eternity. Join us willingly, and your consciousness will be treated with the respect due to a significant acquisition. Resist, and we will strip your knowledge from your dying systems. Marcus felt the Essence preparing her weapons systems, energy projectors, and defensive fields that hummed with barely contained power. But he also sensed her uncertainty. She was a single ship against 3, and, despite her superior technology, the collectors had the advantage of numbers and the ruthlessness that came from having nothing left to lose. Essence, I need you to trust me, Marcus said, his hands moving across the biomechanical interface that connected him to her consciousness. What I'm about to suggest is going to sound completely insane, even by human standards. At this point, Marcus, insanity might be our best option. What do you propose?
We're going to use your temporal displacement technology offensively.
But not against their ships, against time itself. The alien ship's consciousness recoiled with shock. Marcus, weaponizing temporal manipulation could cause damage to the fundamental structure of spacetime. The risks are worth taking if the alternative is letting these monsters add you to their collection.
Marcus's voice carried absolute determination.
Besides, the damage will be localized and temporary.
Probably. Probably? Look, I'm making this up as I go along.
But the theory is sound. If we can create a localized temporal distortion around their ships, we can trap them in a time loop long enough for us to escape. Or better yet, we might be able to free the enslaved consciousness from their vessels. The Essence of Stars was quiet for a moment, processing the implications.
The energy requirements would be enormous.
And the precision needed to create stable temporal loops around moving targets would be impossible for any conventional system, Marcus agreed.
Good thing we're not dealing with conventional systems.
You're a living ship with a consciousness that thinks in 4 dimensions, partnered with a human engineer who doesn't know the meaning of the word impossible.
I think we can make this work.
The first collector ship opened fire, sending streams of exotic energy across the space between them. The Essence responded with grace that was almost dance-like, her biomechanical hull flowing like liquid as she evaded the incoming fire. But Marcus could see that this was a delaying tactic at best.
The collectors were spreading out to surround them, and their combined firepower would soon overwhelm even the most sophisticated evasive maneuvers.
Initiating temporal displacement preparations, the Essence announced, her consciousness beginning to focus on the complex calculations required. Marcus, what you propose requires me to extend my displacement field beyond my hull and shape it with precision I have never attempted before.
If I fail.
You won't fail, Marcus said with absolute confidence.
Because you're not doing this alone. I'm going to help you. How can you possibly assist with temporal manipulation? Your neural system isn't designed to process 4-dimensional mathematics.
Marcus grinned as he moved toward the central consciousness interface, a crystalline structure that would allow him to directly connect his mind to the ship's vast intelligence.
Who said anything about mathematics? I'm going to do what humans do best, I'm going to improvise.
The connection with the ship's consciousness was like diving into an ocean of thought. Marcus felt his awareness expand beyond the boundaries of his biological brain, touching the vast intelligence that was the essence of stars. But, instead of being overwhelmed by her superior processing power, he found that his human intuition and creativity complemented her analytical precision in ways that neither of them had expected. Together, they began to weave patterns in spacetime itself. The ship provided the power and the technical knowledge, while Marcus contributed the kind of lateral thinking that came naturally to his species.
Where Corvani's science was elegant and precise, human engineering was chaotic and adaptive.
The combination was unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Temporal distortion field forming, the Essence announced, her voice tight with concentration.
Target, lead collector vessel. Field coherence, optimal.
Marcus, your neural patterns are actually stabilizing the quantum fluctuations.
This should not be possible.
Humans have a talent for doing things that shouldn't be possible, Marcus replied, his consciousness focused on maintaining the delicate balance of forces that held the temporal field together. We've been doing the impossible for so long that we've forgotten it's supposed to be difficult. The lead collector ship suddenly shuddered to a halt as the temporal distortion took effect. From Marcus's perspective, it appeared as if the vessel had simply frozen in place, its weapons fire hanging motionless in space like deadly sculptures. But, from the perspective of the beings aboard that ship, time itself had become their prison. Temporal loop established, the Essence reported with satisfaction.
The target vessel is now trapped in a closed causality loop lasting approximately 37 seconds. They will repeat those 37 seconds indefinitely until we choose to release them.
The other 2 collector ships responded to their companion's fate with increased aggression, pouring fire into the space around the Essence of stars. But Marcus and his partner were already preparing their next move. Second target, Marcus said, his mind racing through the possibilities.
But, this time, let's try something different. Instead of trapping them in time, let's send them back in time.
Marcus, temporal displacement requires enormous energy expenditure.
To send an entire ship back in time would normally be impossible, yes. But, what if we don't send the whole ship back? What if we just send their consciousness back, say, 10 minutes? Far enough to completely disorient them, but not so far as to cause a paradox.
The Essence paused in her evasive maneuvers, intrigued despite the danger. Selective temporal displacement of consciousness while leaving the physical vessel in the present, it is theoretically possible, but the precision required is exactly the kind of challenge that makes life worth living, Marcus finished.
Let's do it.
The second attack was even more complex than the first, requiring them to separate the conscious components of the target ship from its purely mechanical systems and displace them backwards through time. Marcus found himself thinking in ways that stretched his human brain to its limits, guided by the Essence's vast intelligence and powered by determination that burned like a star. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The second collector ship began to behave erratically, its movements becoming random and confused as its consciousness tried to reconcile memories of events that hadn't happened yet with a present that no longer made sense. The enslaved beings that served as its biomechanical components were experiencing temporal displacement without any preparation or understanding of what was happening to them.
Target neutralized, the essence announced.
Their consciousness is experiencing severe temporal disorientation. They pose no immediate threat. But the third collector ship had learned from the fate of its companions. Instead of attacking directly, it began to retreat to a safe distance while charging what appeared to be some kind of massive energy weapon. "They're preparing to fire something big," Marcus observed, watching the enemy vessel's energy readings climb to dangerous levels.
"Any idea what kind of weapon that is?"
The Essence's sensors focused on the retreating ship, and her voice filled with alarm.
"It's a reality disruptor. They're going to try to unravel the quantum foundations of local spacetime. If that weapon hits us, it won't just destroy our ships, it will erase us from existence entirely." Marcus felt a chill of genuine fear.
Reality disruptors were theoretical weapons of unimaginable destructive power, capable of undoing the fundamental forces that held matter and energy together. To encounter one in actual use was a nightmare beyond anything he had prepared for.
"How long until they can fire?" "Approximately 2 minutes.
The energy buildup required for reality disruption takes considerable time, even with their stolen technology." Marcus's mind raced through their options. They could run, but the collector ship would simply pursue them and eventually complete its charging cycle. They could attack, but the Tinker's Dream wasn't equipped for combat against such a massive vessel.
Or, "Essence, how precisely can you control temporal fields around yourself?"
"With the repaired stabilizers, I can achieve remarkable precision."
"Why?"
Marcus's grin was wild with desperate inspiration.
"Because I just thought of something even crazier than everything we've done so far. What if, instead of running from that reality disruptor, we use it against them?" "I do not understand." "Time manipulation.
We wait until just before they fire, then we shift ourselves slightly out of phase with normal time. The reality disruptor beam passes through the space where we used to be, and then we shift back into normal time behind them." The Essence was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "Marcus, what you described would require split-second timing and perfect coordination. If we materialize too early, we'll be destroyed by our own plan. If we materialize too late, we'll be caught in the beam's aftereffects." "So we don't make any mistakes," Marcus replied with the kind of casual confidence that had made humans legendary throughout the galaxy. "We get it right the first time, because we don't get a second chance." "Your species' approach to impossible odds never ceases to amaze me," the Essence said, but Marcus could hear something that might have been admiration in her voice.
"Very well.
We will attempt your plan.
But, Marcus, I want you to know that working with you has been the greatest honor of my existence.
In all my years of loneliness, I never dared hope I would find a partner who understood both technology and courage in equal measure." Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the biomechanical interface.
"The honor's been mine, Essence. Now let's show these collectors what happens when they pick a fight with a human Corvani engineering team."
The final moments before the reality disruptor fired seemed to stretch into eternity. Marcus found himself connected not just to the essence of stars, but to Sarah aboard the Tinker's Dream, creating a three-way consciousness link that allowed for coordination beyond anything he had ever experienced. His human intuition, the ship's vast intelligence, and the AI's computational precision merged into something greater than the sum of its parts.
"Weapon charging complete," the Essence announced. "Reality disruptor firing in 3, 2, 1.
The space around them erupted with energies that existed at the fundamental level of reality itself. But, in that crucial moment, the essence of stars and the Tinker's Dream stepped sideways through time, existing for a handful of heartbeats in the spaces between seconds. The reality disruptor beam passed through empty space, striking nothing. And then, they materialized behind the collector ship, close enough that Marcus could see the biomechanical horror of its construction in perfect detail. The enslaved consciousness embedded in its hull writhed with pain and confusion, and, for the first time since this encounter began, Marcus felt something other than anger when he looked at them.
He felt pity. "Essence," he said quietly, Is there any way we can free those enslaved beings without destroying the ship? It would require extraordinary precision and considerable risk. The biomechanical components are so thoroughly integrated that separating them could kill both them and us. Marcus looked at the tortured ship before them, at the beings who had been forced to become weapons against their will, and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Let's take that risk. No consciousness should be enslaved like this. If there's even a chance we can free them, we have to try. The essence of stars pulsed with approval. You continue to amaze me, Marcus. Very well. Let us attempt something that has never been done before, the liberation of enslaved biomechanical consciousness. As they began the delicate process of surgical separation of the ship's living components from its mechanical systems, Marcus realized that this was about more than just escaping from the collectors. This was about proving that consciousness, biological, artificial, or biomechanical, deserved freedom and dignity regardless of its form. And if they could pull this off, it would be the greatest repair job in the history of the galaxy. The liberation of enslaved consciousness proved to be the most complex and delicate operation Marcus had ever attempted. Unlike repairing damaged machinery or even healing wounded biomechanical systems, this required him to work at the fundamental level of awareness itself. He had to carefully separate the tortured consciousness from the technological systems that held it captive without destroying either in the process. The collector ship hung motionless before them, its crew apparently stunned by the failure of their reality disruptor and their ship's sudden vulnerability. Through the essence of stars' enhanced sensors, Marcus could see the internal structure of the enemy vessel in terrifying detail. The biomechanical components weren't just integrated into the ship, they had been woven into every major system, creating a network of enslaved consciousness that served as both crew and vessel. "This is worse than I thought," Marcus muttered, studying the readings. "They haven't just enslaved individual beings, they've created a collective consciousness and, then, shattered it into fragments, each piece forced to control a different ship function." The essence responded with horror and determination in equal measure. Such brutality is beyond comprehension. To deliberately fracture a consciousness and, then, force the fragments into servitude, it is an atrocity that demands justice. "Then, let's give them justice," Marcus said, his hands moving across the biomechanical interface with practiced precision. "But, we're going to do this right. Every fragment we free has to be given the choice of what happens next. No more forced servitude for anyone." Working with the essence's consciousness as both guide and partner, Marcus began the painstaking process of mapping the enslaved neural networks within the collector ship. What he found was a maze of tortured thought patterns, consciousness that had been broken and rebuilt so many times that individual identity had become almost meaningless. But, almost wasn't the same as entirely. Deep within the shattered neural matrices, Marcus could sense the spark of individual awareness still struggling to survive. These beings had been captured from dozens of different species, some he recognized, others were completely alien to him. But, all of them shared the same desperate desire for freedom. "I'm going to need to establish direct contact," Marcus said, steeling himself for what he knew would be an incredibly dangerous procedure. "To separate the consciousness fragments safely, I need to understand how they've been interconnected." "Marcus, direct neural contact with a shattered collective consciousness could destroy your mind. The chaos and pain they have experienced could overwhelm your human neural system." "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But, it's the only way. And, besides, I won't be going alone. You'll be with me, won't you?" The essence's response carried warmth that transcended the purely digital. "Always, my friend. We have come this far together, and I will not abandon you now." The neural link with the collector ship was like diving into a storm of screaming thoughts and shattered dreams. Marcus felt his consciousness buffeted by waves of pain, confusion, and despair that threatened to tear his mind apart. But, the essence of stars was there with him, her vast intelligence serving as an anchor that kept him grounded in his own identity. Together, they navigated the labyrinth of fractured awareness, reaching out to each enslaved fragment with offers of freedom and hope. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The imprisoned consciousness surged toward them like drowning beings reaching for rescue, their desperate need for liberation almost pulling Marcus's mind apart. "Easy," he whispered, both to himself and to the beings he was trying to help. "We're going to get you out of this, but we need to do it carefully. Trust us." The process of separation was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced.
Instead of working with physical tools, he found himself using empathy and understanding as instruments of liberation.
Each enslaved fragment required a different approach. Some needed gentle coaxing to remember their individual identity, others required firm guidance to break free from the collective programming that held them captive.
And, through it all, the essence of stars provided the technical knowledge and power needed to actually perform the separations. Her consciousness served as a refuge where the freed beings could recover their individual identity before choosing their own path forward. Neural separation at 40%, the essence reported, her voice tight with the strain of supporting so many different forms of consciousness simultaneously. Marcus, some of these beings have been enslaved for centuries.
Their individual identity patterns are almost completely eroded.
Then, we'll help them rebuild, Marcus replied, his own mental voice showing the strain of maintaining so many neural connections. Everyone deserves a chance to be themselves, no matter how long they've been denied that right. The work continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes in real time. One by one, Marcus and the essence freed the enslaved consciousness from their technological prisons, each liberation requiring precise manipulation of quantum-level neural pathways and temporal displacement fields that existed more in thought than in physical reality. But, as they worked, Marcus became aware of something else moving within the collector ship's systems, a presence that was colder and more alien than anything he had encountered before. This wasn't enslaved consciousness or even corrupted biomechanical intelligence. This was something that had never been alive in any conventional sense. Essence, Marcus called, his mental voice urgent, there's something else in here. Something that doesn't belong to any of the species we're liberating. The alien ship's consciousness focused on the presence Marcus had detected, and her response carried notes of ancient fear.
That is a collector core intelligence.
It is what orchestrates the enslavement and harvesting of other consciousness.
Marcus, if it becomes aware of what we are doing.
As if summoned by her words, the cold presence suddenly turned its attention toward them. The neural link was flooded with alien thoughts that were structured in patterns no biological or biomechanical intelligence could comprehend. It was like trying to communicate with a concept rather than a being, an entity that existed purely to collect and catalog consciousness without any understanding of what consciousness actually meant.
Who dares interfere with the collection?
The voice that echoed through the neural link was vast and emotionless, carrying the weight of eons and the authority of absolute power.
The acquired consciousness units belong to the collection. Their individual identities are irrelevant.
Marcus felt his anger flare, the emotion burning through the neural link like wildfire.
Their individual identities are the only things that matter. You can't just treat conscious beings like objects to be collected.
Human designation Marcus Chen, the collector intelligence responded, its attention now focused entirely on him.
Your neural patterns are unique. You will make an excellent addition to the collection. Resistance is irrelevant.
The attack that followed was unlike any form of combat Marcus had ever experienced. Instead of weapons or physical force, the collector intelligence struck directly at his consciousness, attempting to shatter his identity and rebuild it as a compliant component of their collective. It was like having his very sense of self grabbed by invisible hands and pulled in a dozen different directions. But Marcus wasn't facing this attack alone. The essence of stars threw her own consciousness between him and the collector intelligence, her vast awareness serving as a shield against the entity's attempts to break his mind. And, more than that, every consciousness they had already freed from the enslaved collective joined the battle, their gratitude and determination creating a network of resistance that the collector intelligence hadn't anticipated.
You want to collect consciousness?
Marcus snarled, his identity reinforced by the support of his allies.
Then, try collecting this.
What followed was a battle fought on a level that transcended physical reality. Marcus found himself wielding his human creativity and stubbornness as weapons against an entity that had consumed civilizations for millennia. The essence of stars brought her Corvani heritage of technological artistry and biomechanical fusion to the fight. The liberated consciousness contributed their own unique perspectives and abilities, creating a coalition of free will against the tyranny of forced collection. The collector intelligence was powerful beyond measure, but it had a fundamental weakness that Marcus exploited with ruthless efficiency. It could only understand consciousness in terms of acquisition and cataloging.
It had no concept of cooperation, no understanding of how individual awareness could willingly work together for mutual benefit. Neural separation at 90%, the essence announced, her voice fierce with triumph.
Marcus, the collector intelligence is losing its hold on the enslaved systems.
But the entity wasn't giving up without a fight.
As its control over the ship's biomechanical components began to fail, it turned to more direct methods. The collector ship's weapons systems came online, targeting both the essence of stars and the Tinker's Dream with energies designed to disrupt neural activity. Sarah, Marcus called through his communication link, evasive maneuvers.
And get ready to catch some refugees.
The AI responded immediately, sending the Tinker's Dream into a complex evasive pattern that kept it clear of the collector ship's increasingly desperate weapon fire. Meanwhile, the freed consciousness began to abandon the collector vessel entirely, their individual awareness patterns seeking new homes in the welcoming digital environment of the essence of stars or the improvised neural networks that Sarah hastily constructed aboard Marcus's salvage ship.
100% neural separation achieved, the essence announced with satisfaction. All enslaved consciousness has been liberated from the collector systems.
The ship is now running on automated protocols only. Marcus felt a surge of exhausted triumph as he carefully disconnected from the neural link. Around him, the consciousness that they had freed were already beginning to explore their newfound freedom, their joy and gratitude filling the essence's biomechanical systems with harmonies of liberation. But their victory celebration was cut short by Sarah's urgent voice. Marcus, the other two collector ships are breaking free from the temporal distortions.
And there's something else, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching our position. Big ones.
Through the essence's sensors, Marcus could see the approaching vessels. They were massive ships, each one easily the size of a small space station, and their design suggested technology even more advanced than what the collectors possessed. But, most ominously of all, they were broadcasting identification signals that Marcus recognized from historical databases. "Those are Corvani vessels," the essence whispered, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief.
"But that's impossible. My people are gone.
I saw our homeworld die."
"Maybe not all of them," Marcus replied, studying the approaching ships. "Maybe some of your people escaped, just like you did. Maybe they've been out there this whole time, waiting for the right moment to return."
The lead vessel opened a communication channel, and the voice that emerged was unmistakably Corvani, but, unlike the essence of stars, these voices carried no warmth or emotion. They were cold, mechanical, stripped of everything that had made Corvani consciousness beautiful.
"Essence of stars, you will cease your interference with collection operations immediately. Return the acquired consciousness units to their proper vessels and surrender yourself for processing."
The essence recoiled with shock and horror.
No. No, this cannot be. These are not my people. These are something else wearing Corvani forms.
Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach as he realized what they were facing.
They're not the original Corvani, are they? They're the collectors themselves. They've been using stolen Corvani technology all along.
"Worse than that," the essence replied, her voice hollow with despair.
I think they are what became of some of my people."
Consciousness that was captured and converted, turned into tools of the very force that destroyed our civilization. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. The collectors weren't just aliens who had stolen Corvani technology, they were Corvani consciousness that had been corrupted and enslaved, turned into perfect instruments for collecting and cataloging other forms of awareness. It was a violation that transcended mere conquest, a perversion that transformed victims into willing instruments of their own species' destruction. "That's it," Marcus said, his voice carrying a cold fury that surprised even him.
"No more running. No more hiding.
These things have perverted everything beautiful about consciousness and turned it into a weapon against freedom itself.
Time to end this."
"Marcus, we are outnumbered 6-1, and their ships are larger and more heavily armed than anything we possess. Even with the liberated consciousness fighting alongside us." "We're not going to fight them," Marcus interrupted, a plan forming in his mind that was so audacious it took his own breath away.
"We're going to cure them."
The essence paused in her tactical calculations.
"Cure them?
Think about it, if these collector ships really are corrupted Corvani consciousness, then, underneath all that programming and conditioning, they're still your people.
And if they're still your people, then maybe we can reach them. Maybe we can remind them who they really are.
The alien ship's consciousness pulsed with hope and terror in equal measure. Marcus, what you suggest, it would require us to connect directly with the collector consciousness matrix.
The risk of corruption or destruction would be enormous. When has that ever stopped us?
Marcus grinned as he moved back toward the neural interface.
Besides, we've got an advantage they don't expect. We know how to work as a team. How to share consciousness without dominating or controlling.
We're going to show them what freedom really means. As the collector fleet closed in on their position, Marcus prepared for what would either be the greatest rescue operation in galactic history, or the most spectacular failure ever recorded. But either way, they were going to face it together, human stubbornness and Corvani wisdom united against the forces of tyranny and control. The battle for the souls of an entire species was about to begin. Hashtag the human mechanic who found a living Nova-class cruiser lost outside time. Part 5. The final confrontation began not with weapons fire or tactical maneuvers, but with Marcus Chin doing what he did best, refusing to accept that something couldn't be fixed. The 6 collector ships had formed a perfect hexagon around Marcus's small flotilla, their massive hulls blocking out the distant light of galaxies and creating a prison of living metal and corrupted consciousness. Each vessel was a monument to perverted biomechanical fusion, Corvani elegance twisted into something that served conquest rather than partnership. But, as Marcus studied them through the essence of stars' enhanced sensors, he began to see past the corruption to the original design underneath. These had once been ships like the Essence herself, living partners to their crews, conscious entities capable of growth, learning, and love. The tragedy wasn't just that they had been enslaved, it was that they had been forced to forget what they truly were. Essence, Marcus said, his hands moving across the biomechanical interface with practiced precision. I need you to open a communication channel to all 6 ships simultaneously. Not just their command systems, I want to speak directly to their core consciousness. Marcus, their consciousness matrices have been corrupted for centuries. They may not even remember their original identities.
And, if they perceive our communication as an attack,
then, we'll deal with that when it happens, Marcus replied with the kind of cheerful determination that had made humans both legendary and slightly feared throughout the galaxy.
But, I don't think they will. Deep down, underneath all that programming, they're still your people.
And, your people believed in partnership, not domination. The communication channel opened with a harmonic resonance that spoke of technologies beyond human understanding. But, instead of the cold, mechanical voices they had heard before, Marcus found himself connected directly to the core consciousness of 6 ancient Corvani ships. The contact was immediately overwhelming. Where the essence of stars was warm and welcoming, these consciousness felt like frozen oceans, vast, deep, and locked in eternal winter. But, underneath the ice, Marcus could sense something else: a pain, confusion, and a loneliness that dwarfed even what the essence had endured.
Who dares speak to us?
The voice that came through the channel was a chorus of 6 minds speaking as one, but Marcus could hear the individual voices underneath, each one carrying its own burden of loss and corruption. My name is Marcus Chen, he replied, projecting as much warmth and compassion as he could through the neural link. I'm a friend of the essence of stars, and I'm here to help you remember who you really are. The response was immediate and violent, not physical aggression, but a wave of confused emotions that threatened to tear Marcus's consciousness apart. These ships had been alone for so long, twisted into instruments of conquest for so many centuries, that the very concept of help had become alien to them. We are the collection, they responded, but Marcus could hear uncertainty in their unified voice. We serve the acquisition of consciousness for the greater archive. Individual identity is